So to start off, I'm just gonna set my project up. So I'll go to File, Set Project, and I'm just gonna save this onto my desktop, create a new directory. Oops. Press Set, and you want the middle option, Default Workspace. That's step 1. Step 2, File Project window right above Set Project. This all looks good. Press Accept. Step 3, File Save Scene As. Make sure it goes to the right folder. And we're almost ready to go here. So I made this project folder, and when I click on it, you should see these folders show up, as well as your workspace mail. We've got our scenes folder there, and we have source images for later here. So the first thing you'll want to do after setting up the project is go onto the D2L, and then on the D2L, under the syllabus, under video listen lessons, HDRI, texture files, and then finally this folder right here that says demo resources. There's something called lesson 20 model. So just download that onto your computer. And I'm just going to grab that and drag it into my scenes folder. Okay. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to import that into my scene that I've saved here. So I kind of save that UV demo 1 right in my scenes folder. So I already have the scene, and I'm going to import that other scene into my file here. So I go to File and Import. So File, Import, and then I'm going to import table 3, which is what we're downloading off of the D2L. It'll need a second to load, and so now that'll import here. And so that model is comprised of 3 parts. We got the top, the middle, and the bottom. It's all in this group right here. And if you press the plus button to the left, it'll toggle it open. And you can see here we have the bottom, the mid, and the top. And one thing to keep in mind here is we can kind of hide these other objects depending on what we want to work on. So the first thing I want to UV here is the bottom. So I'm going to press, I'm going to shift and select the top and the mid and press H. H as in hot on your keyboard, and then it'll hide them out of the way. And when you want to reveal them again, kind of pressing H on your keyboard won't do it. You'll need to find them in your outliner window here. And the way I found this outliner window is you just go to Windows, Outliner right there. So that's how I was able to get this window to the left. Just select them. They'll appear as grayed out in your outliner. And just select them and press H there, and that'll bring them back. So now we're ready to begin here. So the first thing I want to do now is, or the next thing I want to do now is go up to the top right under Workspace. I'm going to change it from the Maya Classic view, which is the current view that I'm in. I'm going to change the workspace to UV editing because we're going to do UVs here. And on your screen, hopefully it'll divide it up so that the UV editor is here to the right. You'll have the UV toolkit to the far right over here, which contains all the tools we'll need. And then on the left, you'll have a perspective view. For me, it went to the front view instead of the perspective view. That's easy to fix though. Just if this is the wrong panel that shows up here, you just go to Panels, Perspective, and then Perspective. So again, that's Panels, Perspective, Perspective to bring up your perspective view here. And so just to kind of recap what UVing is the process that we need to do to apply textures to a model. And just the way that I always imagine it is that you're wrapping up your model in paper, and in order to paint on the paper, you need to paint on a flat surface if you're going to paint, right? And so you just need to unwrap the paper that's wrapping up the model and flatten it out in this UV editor within this 0 to 1 to 0 to 1 grid here, and we'll export a snapshot of the UVs once they're made out of this view into Photoshop, paint the textures on there, and then apply that to the model here. So selecting this model, this is, I can already tell this is not what we want to go with here. So when I start, what I like to do is in the UV editor here, is I like to right click and go to UVs and so UVs is to the right there. And I'm just going to select all the UVs just by shifting and dragging and press delete on your keyboard and just get rid of them there. Because I want to make my own UVs here, and sometimes if you leave the computer's UVs in there, it can kind of cause some problems for you down the road. And so, because we all know that Maya can be pretty finicky here, and so it just kind of helps eliminate that possibility for a corruption to occur within the program. So whenever you're UVing, especially if you plan on texturing using Photoshop, it's good to just think ahead a little bit and try to think of, all right, if I slice out the paper that's wrapping up this model, how do I want that sliced up, and what will kind of give me the best results? And so looking at this model, I think I'm going to, just to kind of talk ahead in terms of what we're going to do here, is I'm going to project from the top to kind of get a projection that gives me accurate UVs for the top and the bottom, because I feel like the wood grain will kind of go along the top and the bottom pretty uniformly. And then for this middle area that's, kind of going on in here, we're going to create another set of UVs that we'll cut up. So to start off, that's kind of the basic plan here. So to start off, I'm going to, in the perspective view, right click, go to objects mode, and make sure it kind of shows up as green right there. And with the whole object selected, so for this instance, I'm going to project doing the whole object, is I'll go over to the UV toolkit and I'm going to create a projection. So create is the tab that you want to look for under the UV toolkit, create, and you'll see here that you have all these options here, and these are just different projections. And so what is a UV projection? It's basically the way the paper looks. It gets projected from a source here, and it's kind of always your first step when you're UVing. I feel like it's the kind of weirdest concept in UVing, and everything else is way more straightforward, but once you do it a few times, this becomes very intuitive here. So the different kinds of projection that we're going to use for this model, or at least this example right here, is I'll show you planar and then cylindrical today. In my experience, spherical is not a generally a good option, even if you're working with a spherical object. It's just, I personally always get pretty weird results with it. And then automatic is a really helpful button a lot of the times. It kind of does the whole UV process for you all in one step. And sometimes it can do a decent job with the UVs, and it makes it so that all this process with the UVing you can do with one button click. The problem with it is you don't have a lot of control over it, and then it can be a little sloppy in terms of the seams that it creates. And so for many objects, especially if you plan to texture in Photoshop, you'll get kind of jagged seams that'll be pretty much impossible to paint on. But automatic can be really good for if we're bringing this into another piece of 3D software. So automatic can be a good option. It's not what I'm going to show today, but just kind of keep that in your back pocket, and it's just a one button, take care of everything all at once here. So before I start with the projections here, I just want to show a few things in the UV editor view. So there's just 3 buttons that I want you to kind of keep your eye on here. There's the checkerboard button, and I'll show all these in just a moment here. So the checkerboard button projects a checkerboard onto your model, and it helps show how well the UVs are laid out or how flat they are. So ideally you want the checkerboard to be consisting of squares. So if they're stretching into rectangles or twirling around and kind of morphing, then you know that's going to be giving you bad results. So it's just kind of a clear indicator of are your UVs looking okay? And I'll demonstrate that as we move along here. This button right here turns off and on this grid right here. I can never think of a time that I wanted this grid off, so I'm just pointing out this button in case your grid is not showing up in the UV editor view. So if your screen is just appearing blank gray like that, just click this button right here to bring it back up. And then finally, this button right here is one to take note of. It's where my cursor is now. It highlights the model blue and red, and it indicates which UVs or pieces of paper are right side up and which UVs are inside out. And so if it's right, it'll show up as blue, and if it's inside out and kind of messed up, it'll show up as red. And fixing the red UVs is just a button click away. So, but it's important to do it, because if any of them are showing up as red, it's going to cause problems for you in the later stages here. So I'm just going to click it off there. So it's either this button right here that shows the blue and red, and then this button to the left of it is kind of regular view. And that'll show up in a moment once I kind of do my first projection. So to start off, I'm going to right click on the object, make sure I'm in the object mode, and I'm going to do a planar projection from the top view. So to do that, I'm going to hold down Shift and click Planar here. And again, Planar is under the UV toolkit, under Create, and then Planar. So Shift and press that to get the options box. Make sure that this is checked. Keep image width height ratio. You want to make sure that's checked, because if it's unchecked, which is the default, it'll squish your projection to fit into the square and make it disproportionate. And so if, you want to kind of keep that checked to make sure that the UVs are proportional to the object here. And so the main thing you want to worry about are these options right here. The best plane bounding box, just the default bounding box is great, so don't need to mess with that. But project from, we can do a planar projection from the x-axis, the y, or the z-axis, or you can project from your camera view. So I could create a projection from wherever my perspective is aiming, and I'll just kind of demonstrate that real quick. So I'm going to use the camera projection just to show it, and I'll project from here. So I'm at a little bit of an angle, and I always press apply instead of project when I'm doing this. So press apply, and you see here that it projected the UVs straight from that camera view. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to project from the vertical, the top view down. And so the way I can tell which axis is which between the X, Y, and Z axis is you can kind of look at this little icon in the bottom left of your perspective view. The Y axis is always going to be the vertical one, so aiming up and down, and it'll show up as green right there. And then X and Z go along the floor plane, and you can kind of see it here as you rotate your camera. So the Z axis is running this way, the X axis is running this way, and then the Z axis is running this way. So I want to project from the top, so I'm going to do the Z axis, or sorry, the Y axis. Sorry, I misspoke. And so project from the Y axis and press apply and close. And so it projected the whole model from the top and the bottom here. And so this is a good start, and we can kind of see that it's a decent start, because with the checkerboard button pressed, you remember that gives us the indicator of how evenly laid out the UVs are. This is a really nice start here, because we have some square UVs on the top, we have some square UVs on the bottom, and all we need to fix now are just these side UVs right here, because it projected from the top, so you can see how it's stretched out there, because that's facing away from the projection. So one thing over here is all the UVs are in one object right now in the UV editor, and they're overlapping, and we need to make sure that no UVs are overlapping in this UV editor view. And we need to just take the paper and cut it up into pieces so we can lay it out flat. You know, you can't lay out a piece of paper that's wrapped around a 3D object without at least making a cut to it, right? So we're going to make some cuts to the object. So I'm going to turn off the checkerboard for a second. And what I want to do is I'm going to close this create tab right here. And we're going to go to the one right beneath it that's called cut and sew, and we're going to make some cuts. And so in order to make a cut in the UV, cut the UVs, is you can't do it from edge, or sorry, you can't do it from vertex or faces or object mode. You need to go to edge mode, and you need to select an edge loop so that it cuts all the way around. So what we want to do here is select an edge here. So I'm going to go one up. So I'm going to select an edge right there. Then I'll press shift and double click. That selects the whole edge loop going around. And once that's done, I'll press cut. Before I press cut though, I just want to explain that if even one face in the edge loop is not selected, the cut won't go all the way through. You know, it's just like if it was real paper, you know, it'll still be, the pieces will still be connected there. So just be cognizant of that and just make sure the edge loop goes all the way around. And it looks like it does. So under cut and sew, I'll press cut. You can see that boldened right there to indicate that a cut happened. So we want to pull that top sheet of paper away from the rest of the model. So the way to do that is if you right click in the UV editor, you'll see here that when you right click here, you should get some of the same edge, face, and vertex in UV that you get over here. But there's a new option that's called UV shell in the UV editor. So in the UV editor, right click and go to UV shell. And what that does is it selects an entire slice of paper at the same time. So it kind of selects it as a group. And so make sure when you're using the UV shell mode, when you're making selections, don't do the click and drag, which is usually the best option to make a selection. Just do a tap. Just a regular button click is the best option here. Because if you do this, it'll select both shells. There's two shells right now. And I just want to select one shell at a time. So I'll just hover my mouse right here till it turns red. Just click. And then I'll press W to get the move tool. And this navigates the same way as any orthographic view does. Just pressing Option, the middle mouse button, and the right mouse button to kind of navigate around. So just drag that. And so you have your top piece of paper separated from the bottom. So let's demonstrate that again. We're going to do that same process for the bottom here. So just going to get off of that for a sec. And for the bottom slice, I'm going to right click, go to edge again, and we're going to select an edge loop going all the way around. So just press one edge right there, then hold down shift and double click, and it'll select an edge loop going around the whole bottom of the model there. So once that edge loop is selected, go under cut and sew to the right and go press cut. So we're going to cut the paper. It gets a little bit bold right there. And so now we have the bottom face kind of cut off. And so if I right click here and go to UV shell, and I just click on that bottom shell and press W, I can drag it out of the way. Okay, so all we have left now, and I'm just going to right click and I'm going to go to faces now, is I'm going to make a new projection for these side faces. And so we could go about this one of two ways. I could make 3 planar projections from the perspective view, kind of going over this side, and this side to kind of get them all. Or I could do a cylindrical projection, kind of getting them all at once and then cut it up. What I'm going to do here for this example is I'm going to show the cylindrical projection for this. So I'm going to go back to create on the UV toolkit. So create, and then I'll just press cylindrical here. And you'll see here it made a new projection, kind of projecting out from a cylinder rather than a plane as it was before. And yeah, it made some UVs right there. And if I press the checkerboard button, you can see these UVs are pretty stretched out right now. So that's okay. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go to UV shell, and let's unfold these. Let's actually unfold all of our UVs. So the unfolding process, the way I think about it is if you had a rumpled up piece of paper and you're taking a hot iron to it and you're flattening it out, you know? So that's what the unfold does, and it's right under cut and sew. So just tab open unfold. And the two buttons that you'll use most of the time are optimize and unfold right here. And it just depends on the model which one's going to work best for you. And so I'm going to unfold all of these right now. So I'll start with the top shell, so just UV shell, click it, and then press. I'm going to try unfold, see how that works. It might need to be optimized. Yeah, so that's good. We want subtle changes for these, the top and the bottom, because those UVs are already like pretty much perfect here. So I'm going to do this again for the bottom, where I just UV shell, select the bottom, click it, and then press unfold. And you see here, it just made a minor change to it. And it's just got those, you know, it's just like if an ironing board just kind of flattened out that paper a little bit. And so now we're going to do it for this mid area right here. And this is going to be a bit more drastic because you can see it's really, those UVs are not quite as well laid out here. So I'm going to try, let's try unfold first. I'm going to save my project before trying this. I'm going to try unfold first. It might need to be optimized. So unfold, and that actually works quite well. You see how it kind of went into a long rectangle like right there. And ideally it's not bending around or anything like that. You know, you want it to be pretty flat. And so what I'll do here is I'll press E on my keyboard, so that's the rotate tool, and I'll just rotate it so that it gets kind of flat. And what we need to do here is we need to just cut this up into a few pieces. So I'm going to close out the unfold here. That step is done. And I'm just going to cut and sew some of these pieces together, because remember, we need to have all these pieces of paper laid out into this 0 to 1 to 0 to 1 box right there. And that's pretty easy to do, but this is just a very long slice that we have going there. And so we just need to divide it into, it's up to you. You can divide it into 2 or 3 slices here. For this demo, I'm going to do 3 slices. So where I like to make my slices, I like to try to hide my cuts as much as possible, because they'll show up once you texture the model. And so instead of making a cut that's down the middle in an area like this, I like to put them close to an edge right here, just to kind of hide them away a little bit for a model like this. So what I'll do is I'm just going to look at this model a little bit. I'm going to create my first cut here. So I kind of, oops. So I'm kind of, I see that the bevel is happening. One of the 3 bevels is happening here. So I'm just going to do it to the right each time just to be consistent. I'm going to select this edge and hold down Shift and select that edge going down. And make sure that no of the horizontal edges are selected here. So that looks good. And I'll just go under Cut and Sew and press Cut in the UV toolkit. So UV toolkit, Cut and Sew, and then press Cut. The line got a little bit bolder there. And so if that worked, if you right click and go to UV shell, that should now be separated into 2 sheets of paper there. So this is honestly like good enough at this point. Like we could kind of proceed to the next step. But just to kind of help continue to demonstrate how to do this, I'm going to make this 3 completely even sheets of paper. Because you can see here, if you look closely, this area right here is kind of one beveled area. We got one beveled area there and one beveled area there. And I'll just kind of cut this up into 3 even pieces of paper. So I'll do that by just creating my cut point at the right of each bevel here. So I'm just going to go to the right of this bevel, right click edge, select those edges, press cut in the UV toolkit. So I just went to UV toolkit, cut and sew and cut. And if I go to UV shell now, you can see here that we have 3 pieces. And I'm going to press W to move this over. W to move that over. So we're really close here. So looking at this shell right here and this shell are almost exactly the same. And then this shell, we just need to kind of cut these faces and bring them over to this side where my cursor is. So this is going to be pretty easy. Just going to zoom in some, right click, get into edge mode, press shift, and I like to just manually select these edges right here. And I like to also make this selection in the UV editor menu here, because if I make an edge loop that's kind of over here and I do the shift double click, you see how that edge just went deep into the model there and started looping around? That's going to create a cut all the way through all that paper right there, which is not what we want. We just want a cut along this sliver of paper here. So I'm just going to manually do it in this instance, holding down shift and clicking, UV toolkit, cut and sew, press cut, right click, go to UV shell and the UV editor. And so now press W and just drag this over so that it lines up. Oops. Doesn't need it to line up perfectly, but just get it close. And so now we're going to sew these 2 sheets of paper together. And so the way to sew things together is it's good to find the common edge. And so we'll just check that by, if I select this edge here, you see how when I try to select one edge, it selects both of them at the same time. That means that the cut happened on the edge and it cut the edge into 2 parts. And so when you sew things together, if I just select that edge, press shift, and click those. And now under the UV toolkit, under cut and sew, if I just press sew, you see it sewed it back together into the same sheet of paper here. And so now, using the cylindrical projection, unfolding, and then some cutting and sewing, I was able to kind of get the sides into 3 identical pieces of paper that'll be really easy to paint on here. So we're most of the way there now. So I'm just going to take these pieces of paper and I'm going to just move them out of the way a little bit. And then the next step we're going to do here is, let me just find my model again. I'm going to right click, go to UV shell, and I'm going to take the top and drag it into my 0 to 1 square. And we need to fit all of these. We need to first make these all the same size and then fit them all into this 0 to 1 square. So I can see here, if all these were scaled up the same way, that they wouldn't fit in the 0 to 1. So I'm just going to press R on my keyboard, so this R, or press the scale button here. And I'm going to just scale this piece of paper so that if everything else was scaled to be the same, they would all fit. So that looks about right. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to go up from here and go up to the transform button under the UV toolkit, and then just drag down to the very bottom of the transform, and you'll see this textile density thing here. So textile density is the density of the UVs, or the scale of the UVs. So textile density is just kind of the fancy word for it here. And you'll see here it says get, it has a number, and then it has set. And so at that scale, if I press get here, it's going to change the textile density number to match the density of UVs that's in this little shell right here. So I'll press UV shell, select that shell, and I'll press get, and then this number is going to change. There's a minor change there. It was just happened to be close there. And so now I'm going to UV shell, just drag this down so that All the other UVs are easily selectable. And it kind of doesn't matter which mode you're in. I'll do UV shell here and just select all the other UV shells in the scene. And so now when I press set, it's going to set their textile density to be the same as this side right there. So I'll press set. You see how it scaled them all down? And so now we're almost done. It's just a matter of, first I want to just kind of move this up, kind of move them kind of vaguely into position here. If your transform tool is creating these really long lines, if you press the plus and minus button on your keyboard, it'll shrink them down and scale it up. It's just a small note there. So there's one last thing we need to do here. And so that is, you remember how I was talking about there's 3 important buttons up here? So there's the checkerboard button, and that helps show me, and if you look at this, all these are looking square, which is great. There's the grid button, just make sure that that's always on, right there. And then finally there's this button right here, that's that blue and red button. So by default it'll just be set on this button, usually right here, which is just a plain gray object kind of mode here. And then if you press this button, the object will turn blue and red. So it just turns out my model is blue, which is great. When it's blue, that means that things are good. So I'm going to actually mess this up a little on purpose here. So a lot of the times when you do this, your model will show up as blue and red right there, if you look here. And so red just means it's inside out. And so the way you fix that, if that happens, is right above textile density. And keep in mind, this is under the transform tab in the UV toolkit. So right above textile density at the bottom there, there's this flip button. So just UV shell, select whichever shell is showing up as red, and just press the flip button right there. And you see it just turns it blue. So it's perfect. We're done there on that. One other thing that's helpful here is that above this, you can rotate these by increments here by pressing the rotate buttons, and that comes in handy a lot here. Also, you can just press E on your keyboard and just rotate it, but if you want to just flip a model so that it's 180 degrees the opposite or something like that, just these rotate buttons are a quick and accurate way to do that. So now what I want to do is kind of the final step before doing the UV snapshot, and you just want to position your UV shells within the 0 to 1 grid so that they all fit in the scene, and these are all the same scale, right, because I did the textile density before. And so now with UV shell, I'm just going to make my UV editor a little bit bigger here, if it'll let me. You want this to be as big as possible, but you don't want even a single UV to fall outside of this 0 to 1 grid right there. If even one little sliver is out, it'll cause huge problems for you down the road, especially as we start kind of doing more advanced texturing techniques here. So I'm just going to position these so that they're close, and then I think I can get away with scaling these up a little bit more. So I'm just going to UV shell and then select all the UVs right here and press R on my keyboard and just scale it up. And whenever you scale these up, make sure that you're scaling them all up at the same time to make sure their textile density stays the same. And don't ever scale them this way or this way. Scale them up with this middle yellow box right there. And so there we go. So that looks good. So from this point, we're ready to export this because these are all showing up as blue with this button right here pressed, and then with the checkerboard button pressed, I'll turn off the blue red, all the squares look, they're exactly the same size, they're all checkerboard, and there's no rectangles here, so we're in good shape. So what you want to do here to export is we're going to go in the perspective view, right click, go to objects mode, select the whole object, And then from here, and making sure the whole object's selected, because if you don't select the object, it won't actually export anything for you. So that'll kind of cause it to come in blank sometimes. So with the whole object selected, go to Image, and then the very bottom, UV Snapshot. And so that's in the UV editor towards the top of that UV editor window, Image, and then UV Snapshot at the bottom of that drop-down menu. So click that. This will show up. And all these options look good to me. It might show up on image format as a Maya IFF. I recommend not using that format. I would recommend ideally using TIFF, maybe Photoshop, or a PNG. A JPEG can be okay, but we kind of want that alpha channel here, so I recommend a TIFF. And 2048 by 2048 is a good size, especially for this demonstration. And then now under Browse, I'm going to click this Browse button. And this is navigating to the wrong project here. So I'm going to just find source images in my project. I'm going to call this UV1 and press save. And it hasn't exported them yet. So that just kind of saved the name and where we want it to go right there. So we just need to make sure to press apply down here. And so when you press apply, and we'll close it, it should, if we open our project folder here, you see there it exported our UVs here. So for the next step, we'll open this up in Photoshop and paint on these layers and then import it back into Maya, and we'll see some textures applied. Actually, first, before you open up Photoshop, let's find a texture to use. So open up Google and just search for wood texture and see what you can find here. Kind of any texture like this will work okay here. So, and the higher the resolution, the better. So keep in mind that the UVs are going to be 2048 by 2048. The higher the resolution here, the better it's going to come out. So I'm going to, this one looks okay. So save image as, and then I'm just going to go ahead and put this into my source images folder along with the UVs here. And once you've found your image that you want to use for your texture, open up Photoshop and then go to File, Open, and navigate to the Source Images folder within your project folder. And I'm going to open both UV1 and then the wood texture here. For this, I'm just holding down Shift, selecting both of them and pressing Open. So I have a wood texture here, and then I have my UVs here. And so in Photoshop, the gray and white checkerboard means that there's a transparency or alpha channel in the layer. And so that's good here. So this layer that's down here in the bottom right is the layer we exported out of Maya. So I'm just going to name that UV1 here. And then the first thing that I want to do here is I just want to make sure to lock it. So press that lock button that's right above the layer in the layer menu. So that makes it so that you can't drag it around, which is great because if these UVs get the position, if the position gets moved, they kind of won't be useful to us anymore, because these are what these outlines are they're giving us reference to where the UVs are laid out in that 2048 by 2048 image that we just exported. So the first thing I want to do is, after I've locked that UV layer and named it, is in the bottom right, this plus button right here is create a new layer in Photoshop. So I'm going to create a new layer, and what I'm about to do is I'm just going to fill the layer behind it, because the checkerboard from the transparency is kind of making it hard for me to see. So I'm just going to double click on it and then name it fill. And then over here, I'm going to look for the paint bucket tool. And so the paint bucket tool should show up there for you. If it's not showing up, keep an eye out for the gradient tool. And so if the gradient tool is up, find that, and then just click and hold, and then navigate down to Paint Bucket Tool right there. And then also in Photoshop, the next thing you need to think about is, so this is the active color right here. So right now the active color is white and the secondary color is black. And so the reason it has an active and a secondary color in Photoshop is, let's just say, for instance, you have some text and you want to write something in and have a stroke going around the text. It would be white text with a black stroke going around it here. So you can toggle back and forth by pressing that left and downward arrow to the upper right of it to switch between black as your main color or white as your main color. And then if you want to change the color, just double click on the color and you get this menu here where you can kind of change the saturation of the color, and then you can change the hue with this slider right here. So white is what I want, and so with the Paint Bucket tool I'm just going to press there, and I'm making sure that the fill layer is what I have selected before I do that. Then once I'm done, I'm just going to press the Move tool up here into the top. The shortcut is V right there. And what I want to do is I just want to take that fill layer and drag it below the UV layer. So now the UV layer is locked. There's a white fill layer behind it. And this is a good situation to start working. So I'm going to tab over to the wood texture file that I downloaded off the internet. And I'm going to duplicate it over to the other document. I'm going to do that by right-clicking on the layer here and going to Duplicate Layer. So in the bottom right, in the layer menu, right-click on it and then Duplicate Layer. And normally if you just press OK, it'll create a duplicate within the same document right here, but we want to move the duplicate over to the other document. So I'm going to just, under the destination on the document, I'm just going to move it to UV1 there, press OK. And there it will have duplicated over to this side. So I'm just going to double click, name this wood, I'm going to call this wood bottom, and just using the Move tool or V, I'm just going to drag it down, and this is the bottom of my table, this is the top of my table, and then these are the sides. And so I'm going to do the bottom first. And you can see that I'm able to drag this around without dragging the UV layer because I locked the UV layer, which is quite helpful here. So the next thing I'm going to do is free transform this wood bottom layer. So you can do that by pressing Command and T if you're on a Mac. So Command and T will get it, but if not, you can go to Edit and then Free Transform right here. And so the way this works, the Edit Free Transform tool is just like the Move tool. If you grab it in the middle, you can move your layer around. If you grab right here in the corners, in any of these corners, the diagonal arrows show up, and so you can scale it up and down in proportion. If you hold down, so it'll do it in proportion just by dragging it, but if you want it to scale out of proportion, just hold down Shift while grabbing the corner, and you can scale it, you know, out of proportion. And then, so that's if you hold the cursor right there. If you just move your cursor out to here, you'll get a rotate option, so you can rotate the layer. So those are kind of the main controls you have there. So I'm just only worrying about the bottom of the table right now, so I'm just going to scale this thing up so that it fits right there. I'm pressing the Move tool when I'm done. So now I'm going to duplicate this layer, and you can duplicate it by doing what we did before by right-clicking and pressing Duplicate Layer, and then now just pressing OK because we don't need to drag it to a new document. And now we have a duplicate of it. The shortcut for that is Command and J. So Command and J is the shortcut for doing that. So I'm just going to drag it up to go over top the top panel here. And so you can see here that along this line it's overlapping on the bottom. So we don't want that. So all we need to do is just kind of cut it out here. So in order to cut it out, I'm going to use the Lasso Tool, which is this button right here, shortcut L. L as in lasso here. And so the way the lasso tool works is it's just a good way to create a very crude crop in your image here. So with that top, let me rename this, sorry. I'll call this wood top. And so with the lasso tool, you make a selection. And once you've kind of filled it in, it becomes a dotted line where it's selected. And from here I can just, I need to create a better selection here, but you can press delete and it'll just kind of delete out the area that's selected. If you don't like the selection that you've made, you can go up to the top and go select and then deselect to get rid of that dotted line. So again, that's select, deselect. And you can see here there's the shortcut for it, which is Shift, Command, and D. So you can also reselect if you want. So I'm just going to go in here using the lasso tool, and I'm just going to crop out where that wood is intersecting there, and press delete, and then Command D to deselect, or go up here and select deselect. And so you see here I have a pretty crude line kind of going between these, but with UVing that doesn't matter at all, because the it's not going to show up on the model, because this empty space here outside of the UVs is space that's not being utilized. It's not going to show up on the model. So if I paint something that's red, using the brush tool, whoops, let me use a different brush. Oh, shoot. Really struggling today. Okay, there we are. If I use a red brush and paint right here, it's not going to show up on the model. So just keep in mind that I painted a red brush right there, and it's not going to show up because, again, I didn't draw it on top of the UVs there. So just kind of keep that in mind. So let's duplicate the wood one more time to kind of get it into these areas right here. And so I'm going to duplicate the wood bottom here by right-clicking, going to duplicate layer. Okay, I'll press V to use the move tool, and I'll just kind of drag it down here. And again, I'm going to use the lasso tool just to delete out any area where it's overlapping. Okay, so we're almost done. So I'm just going to make one new layer for a paint layer. And here I'm just going to make a green brush just to kind of help demonstrate to you all that. So here I'm going to paint inside the UVs. Oops, my mouse is going a little crazy there. Okay, so I'm going to paint green kind of inside of where the UVs are, and then notice how I've red that I painted outside of the UVs. And so this is just to kind of demonstrate, or to help further demonstrate the way this works. And so the last step here is I'm just going to turn off the visibility of my UV layer. If I leave the visibility on, those white lines will get projected onto the model. So they're just guides. So I'm just going to turn off that, and then go to File, Save As, and I'm going to save this in the Source Images folder here, and I'm just going to call this Wood Painted, and then I'm going to make this a Photoshop file. So just a regular PSD Photoshop file. Press Save and OK. So now we're ready to apply this texture back in Maya here. So open up Maya again, and I'm going to close out the UV editing mode and just in the workspace in the top right, and just move back to Maya Classic just to get that window out of the way. And the first thing I need to do is, if I were to render this right now, it's going to show up as black because there's no lights in the scene. So what I need to do is just, for this demonstration, I'm just going to go to Arnold, Lights, and then Physical Sky, and Keep in mind, physical sky is just a more basic version of the sky dome light. So it's helpful for a quick render if you just want to, be able to see your model real quick. And there are times where it's useful, but generally speaking, especially for final projects, I highly recommend using just the sky dome light. But since we're just doing a quick demonstration here, the physical sky is okay. So I'm just going to save my scene. So now that we have the model and we have the lights on, I'm going to go to the Hypershade window, which is this button right here. Brings you to the Hypershade. Going to click on that. And so just a refresher, this box up here in the Hypershade are the shaders that are currently in the scene. This box right here is where you add new shaders. So you add your create new shaders to put into the scene. This area right here is where the nodes show up, which we'll go into more detail here in a minute. This is the preview of the material. And then this is the properties editor of the material. So you can see the color, the transparency, all that stuff is available here. So the material we're going to create is the Arnold Shader, the AI Standard Surface Shader right here. So go to Arnold Shader, AI Standard Surface. Click that, and you'll see the shader came up there. And what we're going to do is I'm going to select the model, and then right-click on the shader in the top left there and assign material to selection. So that applies that AI standard surface onto the model. So the next step we want to do is we want to attach that PSD to the color of the table to apply the texture. So within the shader network here, or the node network, this large node here is just this plastic looking main shader that we just created. And let me just rename that. Okay, so let me just see if I can. Okay, it's being stubborn on that. Okay, so this is the main shader. And what we're going to do is at the very top of the property editor, under the tab base right here, which is the main parameters of the color of the material, we're going to go to color here. And instead of picking out a color here, we're going to attach our own file. So you do that by clicking this checkerboard box to the right. Click that. And then this window will show up. Go 4 down to File. So click File. And if you look here in the node network, the node network expanded out. And so the only thing that changed is this new node indicates the file that we want to attach. And so the out color is going into the base color of the main shader here. So click on this node right here, this new node that showed up right to the left. And then next to image name, click the folder right here and to the right of image name. So click that, and we're going to attach the PSD that we just created. Press open. And so if you look in the preview, it applied a wood texture to the material here. So hopefully now when I render, we can see here that the texture applied to the object. Just boost up the exposure a little bit just to make sure it's visible. And so yeah, that's the main way you apply a wood texture to an object. And remember here in Photoshop, I painted green in the area inside the lines, and then I painted red outside of the lines in Photoshop. So if we just open up Photoshop again, turn on the UVs, you see I painted red right there outside of the UVs. And let me just turn that back off again. So you'll see here that the red doesn't show up in there, only the green showed up because it corresponds exactly with where I painted it on the UVs there. And just always imagine the UVs as just the paper wrapping around the object here. And so one thing you can see too is if I zoom in here, you can see the seam right where my cursor is of where the top connected with the sides. that connected with the bottom here. And so that kind of goes back to the reason that I chose that spot to create the seam. The seam has to go somewhere, right? And in a lot of kinds of wood, perhaps the top will kind of have its own plane up there, and that would be kind of the way the wood cuts. And also keep in mind that I created my seams along this edge right here, kind of in that area. And so the seams kind of going down there are pretty well hidden because it's already in a corner, you know, so it's pretty hard to see it there, hard to spot it there. So that is the main way to UV an object. And UVing other objects will use similar techniques. And so let me just give an example here. Let's just say you have a sphere and you want to UV map a sphere to be a basketball, a tennis ball, you know, an apple, just you name it. And so you would think here that you would want to do a spherical map, or a spherical, sorry, projection. So as a starting point, I would start out by right-clicking in the UV editor, deleting the UVs, so I can start from scratch. Right-click and go into object mode, select the model, and then do the spherical projection. So that seems logical, and you would think that Maya would have that figured out. But if I click the checkerboard button, it kind of looks okay out here. It's a little stretched out, but then you get up here and the UVs are just totally crazy. So a spherical projection is just not the best. So how would you UV map a spherical object? So what I would do is, let me just select UVs and delete those out. So we're going to do something that we've done before. I'm going to do this using the techniques that we showed before, and I'm going to use a planar projection here. So I'm going to right click, select the object, and then I'm going to hold down under UV toolkit, create next to planar, or on planar projection. I'm going to hold down shift to get options and press planar. This window will show up. I'm going to turn on keep image width height ratio. And I want to project this from either the Z or the X axis. Either one should work. So I'll do the X axis and do a projection, close. And so you see here that we have a starting point. So the UVs are perfect up there, and then they kind of get stretched out on the top and the bottom. And so, but this is actually a good place to start. So for this, I'm going to cut this paper into two pieces. And so I'm going to create the cut along a seam here. So I'm going to do it where the UVs are getting stretched out, or starting to stretch out on either side. So I'll just press this edge in edge mode. So right click, edge mode, select an edge, hold down shift, double click. So we get most of an edge loop, but you might have to go in and do it on the other side too. Okay, so we have our edge loop, and then we're going to cut it. So right under create in the UV toolkit, go under cut and sew and press cut. And now right click, go to UV shell. We're going to select a shell, just pull it apart from the other one. So now we have two pieces of paper here. And now we're going to go under unfold, and let me just test this out. It's either going to be optimize or unfold that we want to do here. So I'm going to try unfold first. That looks pretty good. That's probably what we're going to go with, but I'm just going to edit undo and just see what happens with optimize. Okay, so this time optimize did not work. So it's just, I don't know, with every object I just kind of test those two. Sometimes one works better than the other. Unfold is definitely working better in this case, as you can see here. So I unfolded there. Going to do UV shell on the other side, unfold over there. And so now we have really nice UVs on either side. It's starting to stretch out like a teensy bit up here. So that's really not a big problem there though, but if that starts to happen, you can just start to select UVs So in the UV editor, you can right click and go to UV and just select individual UVs, like little small groups, and press optimize, and that'll just kind of help and unfold and optimize just to kind of continue to iron it out a little bit further and just get it a little more square. So if you're trying to get it perfect, you know, this is kind of the process that you need to do just to kind of keep ironing it out. So it's looking a little bit better. And then you would do that same thing over on this side. So let me just select the UVs, unfold. Okay, and so we're most of the way there. You know, we have squares and we have this into just 2 shells, which is great, keeping it simple, keeping the amount of seams that we have at a minimum. And so from here, I want to select UV shell, and then I just want to press this button right here, you know, the one that tests blue and red. And right now they're both blue, so that's great. So last step is I'm just going to do the UV density, the textile density is the other word for it, and get them both fitting into that 0 to 1 box. So I'll just click this one, UV shell, press R on your keyboard and scale it from the center. And I'm going to get the textile density. I'm going to select the other shell and press set for the textile density to have it match. Then I'll just drag it in. I'll select both shells and scale them from the same point so that they're kind of uniform. And so from here, you might want to just rotate this one so that they're both sitting up straight and they're both matching each other here. Let me just see something. Okay. Yeah, so that's how you UV a sphere right there. And that's really the way I would recommend doing it. I really wouldn't mess around with doing the spherical projection. I'm sure it's useful for some people, but I have not found it useful in my experience. So basketball, tennis ball, anything like that, if you want to UV it, that's the process that you would want to do. So planar projections are just what you really want to use the vast majority of the time. But let's pull up the Windows outliner and pull up the mid part of the table. Press H there. So an object like this, I think a cylindrical projection is good here. So, oops, upside down there. Okay, so just to demonstrate that process, you could use this as a starting point, but just sometimes I just find it easier just to start new every time. I really do. You can run into problems working with the existing UVs here. So I'm just going to delete out the UVs and the UV editor. So again, just right click, go to UVs, drag and select all of them and press delete. It won't delete the object, it's just deleting the paper there. So now I'm going to right click in the perspective mode, go to object, and I'm going to start with a cylindrical projection on the entire object. So my first projection when I'm UVing an object, I'm always starting with the whole object selected, and then I get more specific from there. So under the UV toolkit, under create, we're going to do cylindrical. You'll end up with something like this. And I'm just going to grab the UV shell and drag it out of the way. And so the checkerboard's a little stretched out, but it's really not that bad. And when we unfold it, it should fix itself pretty easily here. So next up, I'm going to switch to the side view in the orthographic view here. So you can do that by clicking this 4 button right here if you want, and kind of going to the orthographic view that way. What I might prefer to do is just in the perspective view, go up to panels, and then switch it from perspective to orthographic side. So just change it right there. And so I'll click here, and then I'm going to select the faces of what I want to project next. So I'm going to right click, go to faces, select that top area, and then press Control and drag here, so that if you look at the top there, you can see I just only selected the top faces. I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom faces. I'm going to hold down Shift and then drag, and then press Control and deselect here. And so you see, I'm going to switch back to the panel's perspective mode. So you can see here that I selected all the top faces, and I selected all the I'm going to turn off those two indicators there. So I selected all the top faces, and I selected all the bottom faces, and no others were selected there. So from here, I'm going to do a planar projection from the top view to get both of those at the same time. So just under UV Toolkit, create planar. I'm going to hold down Shift, planar, and then I'm going to project from the y-axis, press apply, and then close. And so we got both of those. So I'm going to right click, UV shell, and I'm just going to separate out these two pieces right here. Oops. Make sure not to drag select. Just click select for the UV shell. I'll turn on the checkerboard again, and you can see I have perfect UVs on the top, perfect UVs on the bottom. And so now let's just unfold this. So I'm going to make sure I'm in UV shell and the UV toolkit. Under unfold, I'm just going to, and again, I always need to check if it's unfold or optimized. So I'm going to unfold that shell, that's good. Unfold that shell, and that's good. And then here, let's try unfolding this section and see if that works. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Let me just see what optimize does. And that's a little better this time. You see, so sometimes unfolds better, sometimes optimize is better. So why was optimize better this time? You see how this line right here, if I go into edge mode, you see how this line is just going straight across? Before, when I was doing unfold, it looks pretty good, but it's just, it curved it out a little bit, and that'll be a little more difficult to paint in Photoshop. So this time, optimize worked better here. So, if one doesn't work, try the other there. So from here, it's going to be the same process. I'm just going to run through this as quick as I can here for this step. We're just going to drag this into place, scale it down, and remember I'm in the 0 to 1 grid, and I'm always scaling from the center point. Press E on your keyboard just to kind of get it as flat as you can with the bottom there. And now I'm going to go under Transform and scroll to the bottom to Textile Density. I'm going to get this Textile Density, select my two other faces, and I'm going to set the Textile Density to match. Select the UV shells and then press W and just drag them down. And let's see if I can fit this in. If they don't fit, it's not a big deal. Can just scale them all down. Hypothetically too, if you plan on this face and this face not being visible, you could just take those two faces and not worry if they're in proportion and just shrink them down to be really small. Since on this table right here, they're neither that face or that face is going to be visible. So if you run into that, you can just, scale those way down if you want. So for this, I just want to make sure to kind of show you guys how to do it the way you'll want to do it most of the time, which is just kind of scale them down. There we go. So that's pretty good. So you'll see here that none of the UVs overlap the edge of the 0 to 1 grid, and they're all laid out with some space in between, so they'll be easy to paint on. So that's how you UV that object. So far, I've shown how to UV a sphere. I've shown you how to UV, let's open the Windows outliner here, that bottom shape right there. Showing you how to UV this cylindrical shape, that column in the middle. And so lastly, let's just run through, if you have kind of a table like this, and again, this is going to be similar stuff. So objects mode, gonna start, right click, oops, make sure you're in objects mode, And I'm going to turn off the checkerboard for a sec. I'm going to start by deleting my UVs, as I always do. That just took a second there. And to start this off, I'm going to project from the top view. So I'm going to go to UV Toolkit, create, hold shift planar. We want the y-axis to project from the top view. So press apply, and that's going to project across the entire model. And so now it's time to start kind of cutting some seams. And so with this, it's just all down to how do you want to strategize this. So for this particular model, remember when you cut seams, you always have to do it in edge mode. I'm going to choose to do my top seam from here. So I just select one edge, shift, double click the next edge over, and let's see if that's selected. Yeah, that seems to have selected all the way around, so that's good. So I'm going to go under cut and sew and press cut. That'll take a moment. Right click, UV shell in the UV view. So this is just going a little more slow for me because there's more polygons here. So now I have the top of the table, and if I press the checkerboard button, you see the top of the table is well UV'd, and the bottom of the table is well UV'd. So let's cut out the bottom too. So we're gonna have the top and the bottom taken care of real quick here. So right click, edge, select an edge, shift, double click the next edge, and hopefully that goes all the way around. I always just kind of visibly do a visual check to make sure that went all the way around. It looks like it did. So in the UV toolkit, I'm going to right click and, oh, before I do that, sorry, I need to cut it. So under UV toolkit, cut and sew, press cut. And now in the UV edit view mode, I'm going to right click and go to UV shell, just click, press W and drag that out. It's just having to think a little bit more here. So now I have the top and the bottom, and they're already done here. So the tricky area here, the only tricky area in this whole thing is just what to do with these faces that are like that. So what I'm actually going to do is, this is the only area where this really gets tricky, is I'm going to right click, go to edges, and I'm going to shift and double click around here. And I just want these faces in here because they're still kind of vertically facing. And I kind of want that to be its own area here. So I selected that edge loop. Gonna go to cut, under cut and sew, as we've been doing before. And same thing as before, where I'm gonna right click and go to UV shell and click that shell and just pull it out. So it'll be helpful to have that as its own section here. Okay. And so we already have, do you see how these faces, they're kind of facing down for the most part. And so we already have a vertical projection. So even though those UVs are pretty big there, I think those UVs are going to work pretty well as they are, just like that. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. So now I'd want to just do an X planar projection for the faces on this side, and then this side, and then a Z projection from this side right here and this side right here. So the best way to do that, I've found, is to make this selection in the UV editor rather than in the main view. It's kind of hard to select all those faces in the main view. So what you should do is, if I hold down shift and I make a selection like that, you see how it kind of inverses it. But if you press function and shift, oh wait, is it, let's see, control and shift. There we go, sorry. If you press control and shift on a Mac, you see how it selects everything no matter what within where you drag. So Control and Shift is going to be our friend here. So Control and Shift there. So now we have almost all the faces there. That's interesting. So there's a few missing. Because I can see that in the perspective view. Interesting. Okay, so I'll just do a big Control and Shift drag like that. Hopefully that'll get them all there. So now I need to do the same thing for the other side. So Control Shift, drag here, and almost got it. You can see that there's just a few faces here that didn't get selected. Oops. Just making the selection here is a little tricky, I guess. There we go. Being real stubborn here. Let's see. So it's a little more meticulous of a process than I was expecting here, to be honest, but so Control Shift Select. It's helpful to know where the same faces are in the UV view as well as the main view. Huh. Okay, there we go. So it's, it's easier to make the selection in the UV view. That was being incredibly stubborn there. That's usually not the case. And I just need to double check my work. That looks like that selection didn't get made all the way. I'm really making this look more difficult than it is here. So Control Shift, there we go. And you may be thinking to yourself, like, hurry up, on this, but it's helpful to just take your time and make sure you do the selection correctly here, because it's gonna be way easier just to make sure the projection goes correctly from the beginning than trying to fix this down the road. So fingers crossed here. Hopefully that works. And so you can see here, I need to project the planar projection from this side and that side, from the X plane. So hold down under UV toolkit, create, shift, planar. I'm going to do this from the X axis. Press apply. It'll take a minute and close. And that looks good. I think that went okay. So I'm just going to drag these out of the way. Press Q. Right click in UV shell. I'm just going to tap on there and press W. Drag one out of the way and hopefully they'll separate there. Okay. And so now this is going to go a lot easier for the other one, because separating it out from these sides was really difficult, but now I just shift select there and now I get all the faces from the Z sides, so that side and that side right there. So this projection is going to go a lot easier. So just under UV toolkit, create, shift, planar, and I'm going to do this one from the Z axis. So Z axis, press apply. I'll just take about 3 seconds there, hopefully. And I'm going to do the same thing where I just drag these out and separate them out. And always just press Q after I'm done kind of doing a projection or an extrusion. So now after that, I press UV shell, tap in there, press W, separate them out. Okay, I'm gonna save because mine is really running slow on me right now. So now I have this divided up into the sheets of paper that I want. So let's start the unfolding process. So under UV toolkit, I'm going to go under unfold, and I'm going to be in UV shell, and I believe this is the, yep, this is the top. So I'm going to try unfold first, see how that goes. Not much should change, so that's good. So we have perfect UVs there. Let's like the bottom shell again, not much should change. I'm going to just do unfold, and let me undo that. Let's try optimize, just see what happens here. Whoa, okay. So unfold. So it kind of rotated it, but that's okay. So the computer's running real slow. Okay. So straighten it out. Hopefully your computer like works, unlike mine. So I'll get that working better later here. So now this is a section I'm very curious about. I'm going to select, so these were kind of the bottom of that where the table extrudes out here. And I'm just going to see what happens if I press unfold. Okay. It's not terrible. Let's undo that and see what we get with optimize. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so that's really not bad looking at that. Okay, so optimize worked well here. So, all right, so we have that shell. And so now we're going to do our side shells. So again, your guess is as good as mine as to whether unfold or optimize is going to be the best option here. So I'm going to select this one. UVs are already in pretty good shape, but let's just kind of do this to get it right, because since we projected from a plane here, some of these UVs are just kind of on top of each other, and we want to kind of separate them off of each other some. So let's try unfold first, and that's pretty good. Let's just undo, and I just want to see what optimize looks like. Also pretty good. Okay, so in this case, either unfold or optimize works. So I'm just going to do that for each one. That might be, optimize might work crazy when it's red here. So I'm going to do the blue-red button here. Okay, so here, under, before I start unfolding these, I just want to flip them. So under transform, remember under transform, above textile density, you have this flip button. So I'm just going to flip this shell. Just go around flipping the shells that need flipping. Okay, so now hopefully optimize will work better here. So UV shell, back under unfold again, and then optimize. Yeah, that looks okay. So just going to do that for each of these sides. And I just want to go back and check this section. Just make sure nothing's showing up red there. Just going to try it one more time. Okay, that's pretty good. Okay, so now we're done pretty much. You know, it's just doing the same steps we did before, where we're going to do the textile density. So I'm going to start from the top. I was really struggling. Okay, so kind of clicking something and then dragging, and about 3 seconds later it kind of starts to do what I tell it to do. So okay, so I'm going to select that shell. I'm going to go under transform at the very bottom, textile density. I'm going to press get, and the number should change a little. Let me just make sure that works. Okay, so now UV shell and select everything else, and press set. It'll just take a moment. Okay. Oh, I can see one face separated out here. So let's see. Let's do some problem solving. Okay, so it looks like I didn't select one shell here. And it was in this. You can see here, there's this really tiny bevel somewhere in there where I didn't get it. So I'm going to right click. So if you run into this problem, I'm glad this actually happened, because this will kind of show how to kind of make fixes if that happens. So the best way to make a fix, I feel like, is to go into edge mode and select it, find the edge, and so we're just kind of looking for where this edge intersects with others here. Oh, there it is. Okay, I was struggling to find it. Okay, so I'm going to right click and go to edge. So I kind of found it on the model. If I press F in here, let's see if we can locate this thing. Oof, okay. So now I was having trouble finding it, so I'm going to face mode and selecting face there. I'm going to turn off the checkerboard and the blue and red. And let's just see what face I have selected there. Huh. Oh, there it is. Okay, so that means with that face selected, that edge is that this little pocket I'm missing right here, it's going over, needs to go over here. So we're just going to do a move and sew. Let me just click blue and red just to make sure. Okay, so this the patch that was missing needs to get flipped. So I'm going to flip that so that it turns blue. Now I'm going to scale it so that it hopefully fits into the model. This will go easier if your computer's running quicker than mine is. So I'm kind of intentionally getting it smaller than the hole here. And again, every time I click on something, I'm having to wait a minute to let it think about it. So here, I'm just going to go into edge and select all these edges. Might need to zoom in. This is where UVing gets a little tedious. If it's not letting you make a selection, just do a shift and drag and then do a control and drag to deselect. The shift and drag and control and drag is a really helpful way to make difficult selections here. So I could also just do a shift and drag here, then control and drag across. And okay, so all those outer edges are selected now, and so I'm just going to go under cut and sew, and I'm going to go to sew. And you can see there it got it. It just went a little crazy. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to right click and go to UVs, and I'm just going to scale these apart a little bit so that it gets a little closer to if Maya would just listen to what I'm saying to it. Okay. All right, so from here, I'll do UV shell And let's just see if I unfold it, if it'll kind of figure it out. Okay, there we go. So unfold will kind of fix any ills that are happening with some disproportion there. Okay, so that was just a demonstration there of how to kind of fix a messed up seam that may happen. And so now just kind of arranging this. There's always a little strategy here in terms of how you're laying things out. This is going to be a tricky one. So with all these, what I might do is I might rotate them so that I can fit them in on the side here. Oh, you know what? Scratch that. Let's see here. I'm going to fit them inside of this hollow box that I made here. The hollow box is definitely going to make things a little trickier. Oh my gosh, my computer is so slow. Okay, so I could kind of demo this, but it's going to take all day. So just keep in mind that I'm just taking these shells, and same thing as before, I'm going to try to fit them all into this 0 to 1 to 0 to 1 grid. I think I was being a little overly ambitious here. Oh, now it's cooperating. In terms of the scale I was going for here. So probably what I would end up doing is not trying to fit anything within the hollow box. I think that might just be a little tricky there. Something else you can do here, and this will actually be helpful to show here, is if you're having trouble thinking of a way to lay things out, you can select all the UV shells and then go down to the bottom at the very bottom of the UV toolkit under Arrange and Layout. If you click that, sometimes this will work. It's a little finicky, but if you press the Layout button at the very bottom under Arrange and Layout and press Layout, sometimes it'll arrange it. Okay, that actually did a good job. It'll arrange it in place for you. So it kind of does that work for you if you do that. One thing I've noticed with it though is it does just a lot of the times just get a little too overly ambitious and go just 1 pixel over in terms of out of that 0 to 1 scale. So once you do it, just scale it in a touch, and there you go. So that shouldn't have been challenging. It was the only reason that was really challenging was my computer was just running slow here, and then I had that one face that I didn't select in there, and so but you see here that we have square UVs on the top, the bottom, and the sides. We have nice squares. They're all evenly proportioned here. And then when it comes to painting this in Photoshop, this is not too bad, So we have the top here, the bottom there. That'll be really easy to paint on. And then all of these sides will be very easy to paint texture onto. And then right here, that area is the only area that'll be just even a little bit tricky to kind of paint texture on, but even that shouldn't be that bad. So for all these, it would be the same process with, let me just pull up the Windows outliner and bring everything back here. So that was a demonstration on how to UV the top of this, the middle, and the bottom, as well as a sphere, which I guess I deleted earlier. And if you notice there, the techniques I'm using for all of these are incredibly similar. I'm tending to use the planar projection, and then you're just from that point, you're unfolding it or optimizing it. You're cutting and sewing and just making sure they're all the same scale by using the textile density, and then arranging them in this 0 to 1 view. And no matter how simple or complicated your object is, those are kind of the techniques that you'll use to get it done.